All right, guys. Welcome to the stream. So, in this one, we have a pretty interesting topic that I wanted to discuss that I've been kind of thinking about for a little while. I mean, honestly, it's been on my mind for this entire year, ever since the start, really. But I never really was able to put it into like a visual format. What we have here, and what I really want to talk about today, is what I call the competitive team template. It's basically everything that goes into creating a long-term competitive team that wins. So there's 4 things that go into that, right? And I can give a little brief sort of, talk about each individual thing. But it's going to come down to how you grade each individual element. So if you're unfamiliar with this grade scale I have on the right side, we kind of went over this in another live stream I did back in EASHL 24, where it was kind of like, all right, being able to break down and grade your own performance in different areas of your game. So the more important thing to figure out when you're going through stuff like this, whether you're breaking down your own gameplay or your team, is understanding where the midpoint of that is between the high and the low. Obviously, what it is to reach the top, what it is to be bottom of the barrel, absolutely nothing. And then what it takes to basically cross each tier. And it's really important to figure out what it takes to cross into the high, because the high is obviously the most important aspect that you want to get your grade to be, essentially. But that's basically, another topic. When you talk about the competitive team, right? When you talk about foundation, for example, foundation is pretty much everything that happens off the ice. Mostly. I mean, it's basically your mindset, right? Are you coachable? Do you have good vibes in the party? Kind of stuff like that. Are you dedicated to whatever goal you have set? Which is something that has to be described to everybody from the start. Everybody has to be on the same page of what your goal, what your intention is. And then how available are you to play? Those are like the 3 main things that go into forming a strong foundation. It's pretty much setting your lineup around those 3 parts into the foundation. What's up, Jason? How we doing, bro? That's the foundation. That is the most important thing, right? Generally speaking, when a team fails, it is because they failed at the foundation. And what that means is the foundation entered the low. When you're forming a team from the start, you usually kind of build it where you're just slightly above this. You're getting guys in, you're seeing what works. When you get to a high foundation, you start to really build something that's sustainable, something that can last for a long time. And that's the whole point of this. So it's very important right here, getting this right. When you go into the individual skill, that's something a little bit different. Well, obviously, it's pretty much everything concerning the skill individually. So it has nothing to do with your team play or anything like that. It's simply your individual talent. So your talent with the puck, making passes, playing defense, transitionally, like everything that you look at from an individual standpoint, that goes into the individual skill category. And, getting that, the more reps you get in, like your process of improving, whether that's with a team, separately, when you're getting your own separate reps in with other guys, you're going to be obviously improving in that category. When you get to game plan, you start moving up the hill. Now you start getting into your team play, how well your team traps, how well you break out the puck, how well you play offensive, like in the offensive zone, in the defensive zone, the cycle game, the defense, right? PK, power play. You start getting into that. You say, wait, when the blocks above foundation are higher, the foundation is high. Well, no. So the reason it's kind of trending upward is because I think of this more or less like you're building a house. You've got your foundation. I mean, technically, you don't necessarily need to call it foundation. I call it that because that's just what comes to mind. I always think of like when you're building a house from the bottom up. You know, you want to have your foundation right. If the foundation is super weak, then your first floor, second floor, third floor, it's gonna eventually come crashing down, right? So if you flip this upward like a tower or up, trending up, if the foundation gives, everything else falls. But you could call it team building or something like that if you wanted to. But you know, I have it up kind of just, you know, so you see yourself going upward, kind of like on a hill or going, you know, rising up. But anyway, yeah, you got pretty much everything, you know, individually here. Then you've got your team play, and then it's chemistry at the final, right? So this goes into what it would be basically natural chemistry. You know, first time you play with somebody, you just form, you know, you just kind of play well with them, or it's developed chemistry over time. And depending on which way you go, determines whether it is going to be reliant more on the natural or developed chemistry. Ooh, what's up, crazy face? How we doing? On TikTok. But yeah, that's just pretty much, you know, getting reps in, just constantly, you know, just working with your guys, and that's how you do it, right? Now, when you talk about a team, all four of these elements work together to form, you know, obviously a team. I mean, I've been on like about six different teams now. Every single team that's failed, like I said, is because of the failure to keep a solid foundation intact. And again, foundation, it's basically setting your lineup. So when you typically look at building a team, you have to know where are you going to start. If you see here, we have a long term, which is going from left to right, and then the short term is in the reverse. Now, the short term does not mean it's going to fail, but the reason it's red is because it has a risk of it not working out. So most teams, right, a lot of teams nowadays, they pretty much neglect the foundation. They don't really care too much about that. What they're trying to find is the talent. So when you have, like, when you're looking to find, you know, when you're looking to build a team, you know, a lot of guys look at like how well they mesh with certain people. So like, let's say you play with with a guy for the first time and you're just like clicking. It's because you see the ice the same as they do. You form, you know, it's that natural chemistry. You're at the relative same skill level. You see the game well. So when you mesh well with somebody, that's like, all right, you like where it's heading. Like you actually like where it's going, right? So, and then based on that, you eventually see, right, you're seeing the game well, so you believe this is also high, right? Both these things you look at, and what you, in your mind, that basically determines the level of the skill of that player when you look at it from that effect. So most teams now, right, they're just, I want to get guys that are around my skill level, so I'm going to look at guys that I mesh well with and see the game the way I do. And then this guy's good because he accomplished both those things, and then now he's an eligible candidate to be a part of my team. If I don't mesh well with somebody, that means they don't see the same thing that I see in terms of the game of sixes or threes or whatever it is that you're trying to grind for. Therefore, I don't think he's good, and he's not an eligible candidate. So everything works as one. Like, it kind of reflects off the next element or tier or whatever it is, right? When you go from the opposite way, you actually neglect these things. You don't care about them. What you're trying to find is guys that are dedicated to the grind as you. Right? So you're not really necessarily looking at skill. When I was building a team this year, back in like February, the way I looked at it is, again, I was looking at the elements that form a foundation, and then I was slightly looking at skill. I looked at skill last. This is where I was looking at. I didn't even care about this stuff. None of that mattered. It was kind of like, are they coachable? Do they have good vibes? Are they around? And are they dedicated to the grind like I am? And then if I found two guys that had all those things, then I looked, all right, who's the better player? He's going to be in the starting lineup. And that's kind of how you build it. You get guys that have the same grind level as you, and therefore, you know, you want to play with them. Doesn't matter if they're not good or not, because you can nurture you can nurture that talent. When you look this way, from right to left, you're not trying to nurture talent. You're not trying to grind with them and improve their skill level, thus also improving your skill level. You're not going to do that. So that's why it has a risk of it failing, because it's a short-term grind. Could be. Right? But when you go the other way, you are trying to nurture the talent, because you are trying to build a strong foundation first that will then lead to, all right, I want to play with these guys. Now that's going to improve this, right? Because you're like, all right, let's grind a little bit. You know, we're on the same page. Let's grind, regardless if, like, you know, somebody's up here, the other guy's down here, this guy's down here. Everybody's going to be trending upward because you're playing with each other, you're coaching them, you're helping them out. You know, you may break down film for them or whatever. So everybody's going to continue to go up. Therefore, that's going to form their knowledge of sixes, and therefore they're going to gain, everybody's going to gain chemistry. So everything is in the works from left to right to trend upward. Doesn't matter the starting point, doesn't matter how good all these three elements are. If this is high, everything is trending upward. That's why it's green. When you work the other way, you're not really trying to nurture talent. You're just trying to find the guys that are already there. So if they're here or they're down here, like, you may only be with them 1 season, 2 seasons, whatever, at max, right? If I'm talking about like esports, right? Esports related, building a team to eventually win in the main division, or even just like contenders or whatever, you know, working from left to right is more of a long-term grind for that. What's up, Eric? This is Facts. Teamwork, chem. Let the individual skills shine when it's in the strategy. If you have high levels of individual skill and strategy, you play to your team's strength, and have chemistry. If they are at a high level, you are very hard to beat. But if one is weak, that is the exploit. The other team will break down and try to beat you. You're right, at that. I mean, yeah. So that's, yeah. I mean, right. Like, looking at it from that standpoint, you know, let's see. I kind of lost track of what I was talking about. When there is like a weak point in the lineup, that's where kind of, you know, that's where the foundation kind of comes into play. How strong is it? Because it's not only like the dedication itself, it's everybody has the same mindset as you. Like, they have the same expectation as you. So for me, like, when I was building a team to eventually compete for the first time, nobody had any esports experience at that time. So I wasn't necessarily, again, I wasn't caring so much about that. You have to set an expectation that's realistic, I think. So for me, again, like, my expectation wasn't that we were even gonna, like, it was kind of just like play, see where we land. If we made playoffs, then fine. If we didn't make playoffs, that's fine too, technically. But again, like, there was a esports tournament like around the summertime, I want to say, and people were trying, you know, like, we wanted to join that, or like some people wanted to join that, but in my opinion, like, we didn't even, in my opinion, our foundation was low. Like, we kind of just we were just playing with whoever. There was nobody locked into a like specific position. So And like we didn't, you know, again, we didn't have a set lineup. So to me, it's like you don't want to start competing or like really engaging in whatever the grind is that you're doing until you have at least a, what I would say, a medium or higher foundation level. Which again, you have to understand, what does it take to reach medium or higher? And to me, that's having 6 starters that you're going to choose, right? That you have set. Doesn't mean you have the utility guys or anybody else that could fill in set. It's just a matter of, all right, we have 6 guys that we're going to compete with. So that's what I'm, you know, that's when you do that, that's when you can technically compete. If it's the first time, then you set an expectation. All right, we're going to go in, and you could either have an expectation to make playoffs, or you can have an expectation to just kind of have whatever you want. Like, it really doesn't matter. To me, it was like, since nobody competed, wait, hang on a second. Okay. Since nobody competed, right? It's like my expectation was just, all right, let's just go in and we're gonna work on each aspect of the game and just continue to get better. But like, again, you know, when you talk about long term, you have to have guys that are willing to go through that grind with you, meaning they have the same expectation. So to me, it's like I had like a 3-4 season plan. Technically, right? In my mind, I never really made it verbal to everybody, which is probably the reason why I kind of went the other way. But you know, the first season was like, all right, let's just do whatever, right? Like how wherever we land is fine. Let's say we didn't make playoffs, then the next season, right, the next event, make playoffs, first round. If it's a first or second round exit, that's fine. Season 3, event 3, 3rd, 4th round, let's win it. That's how it is. As long as everybody's on the same page and everybody's moving upward in all 4 of these things. Because again, when you have when these things get strengthened and go up, that also most likely will raise the foundation level too, because people will want to compete. Other people will want to also join you in that grind. If you have a team that's constantly like, everybody kind of sucks and we're trending downward, that's going to ultimately affect the foundation too, and that's going to bring it down. Right? So all 4 of these things, again, work as one. But again, the expectation is it has to keep getting better. But it's a slow grind. It's a long-term grind. When it's a short-term grind, you're going to be like, all right. I mean, you may not even have an expectation. It may just be, hey, we're going to form a team with guys that we think accomplish this as high as it is. So, I mean, it's not going to be high, but it's going to be like somewhere around here, or maybe higher. Because, like, you're going to search for specific talent. And therefore, regardless if it's a win or a loss, like, however you may lose, right? Like, that's going to, you're going to eventually kick some guys out. Or you might just move on from the team all together, because there wasn't a specific goal or expectation from that team. So it ultimately turned into a short-term grind. It's win or I'm out. You know what I mean? Like, it's not, you don't necessarily want that. You want to have a specific goal in mind, how long it should take to get there, and then work towards a process to actually get there. And then while you do that, right, you look at your strengths and weaknesses, and then you make changes from that. A lot of teams build around offense and not defense as well. Yeah, and that's why, again, you gotta, like, regardless of like the like specific areas of the game that are failing, it's all relative to, like, all right, what is the expectation? Like, what is the goal? And then you just work on that. Like, you work on your weaknesses, you work on, and then you continue to work on and build on your strengths. But I mean, these things can kind of work good as well too, right? Like, it could actually, like, let's say, regardless of which way you start, you could technically go this direction, and if it works, it actually turns around and builds this way. So regardless of which way you want to start, if you want to just start with the foundation or you want to just start with guys that you mesh well with and try to build a team that way, whichever way you start, ultimately, if going from right to left actually succeeds, it's going to turn around and it's going to go back the other way, because now because basically what you did was you selected guys that are around your talent level. They see the game like you do. You play well. That means you look at them and you say, all right, these guys are good. They're all skilled. They see the game the way I do. We have some decent chemistry. And then now you build a lineup that's actually good. Well, if the foundation turns out to be, from the yellow or higher, now you're working again from now the left to right. And now you can actually turn what could be a short-term grind into a long-term grind in the long run based on success. But again, everything from the right to left is built on a success. You need to have success or else it fails. From the long-term grind, you may not have success, but that doesn't mean the team is just blown up and gone. It's all right, let's work on what the issues were. Let's keep at it, right? Again, it's a test on how strong the foundation is. And then you keep on improving. And then, you get other guys involved. Maybe some changes will be made. Other guys move up. Maybe other guys move down. Other guys step down or whatever. And then you eventually, again, you improve. Right? But it has to keep on moving up, right? That's the whole point of this long-term grind. So it could be, this, when we talk about this could be pretty much anything. It's any type of goal. LG, it's kind of tough to really say because the teams are constantly changing. Like, LG is always from right to left because it's one season, and unless you have a contract extension on that team, you're not going to be on that team for the next season unless they bid on you again, which could happen, right? There's a couple times where guys are on the same team for 5-6 seasons, but most likely that's not going to happen. Most likely it just flat out won't. So LG, it's always a means of a short-term grind. And it's literally how it is, right? Like, it's what, a 2-3 month season, and then that's it. Then you play, and then you either move up or down or whatever the hell, you stay the same. And then other teams grab you. And then trades are happening too. So if you're trading, guys, you lose out on all these elements. It really doesn't really pertain too much to LG. But technically, if you think about it, the success rate of an LG team comes from how well the lines mesh with each other, how well they see the game, if they're on the same page with that. That also then goes with their individual skill. So if all this is good on an LG team from the first to the third line, I wouldn't necessarily want to say that the foundation is the success level of that, because it's not. It's kind of like negating that. But if these other three elements are there, like, that's the reason why certain teams win and other teams lose. It's just a matter of, and then you got guys that like actually spend time throughout the week to gain this, so how much chemistry do you have that like lifts up everything else? Again, when you look at it from every single individual standpoint, if you see the game well with another player and you're on the same page with the game plan, that'll automatically boost the stuff up. Individual skill is kind of tough, but like, again, like, it all kind of feeds into each other. So if you see the game well with another player, that's gonna, again, that you're gonna boost that chemistry, the skill, and the foundation. Everything's kind of gonna go up. Individual skill too, it kind of feeds off the rest of this too, because again, like, how skilled you are, you're most likely gonna have a decent look at the game, and then you're gonna have that natural chemistry with other guys too. Yeah, LG is kind of tough, but like, again, like, esports is kind of like more or less what I'm talking about, or potentially a top 10 leaderboard grind, but that's like a different parameter in terms of how you see this scale, because like, you could be a top 10 grind and have your team in all these areas reach the high, but that high will be nowhere near the level they would need to be a successful esports team. Like, that's just, you're not even in the same playing field. So however far you want to stretch this scale, if you zoom into it, you know, it's all just dependent on what type of grind you're actually going for, whether it's esports, top 100 grind, or top 10 grind, or club final grind, or whatever it is, right? Like, those are way different. Like, there's, you know, if you have a 2s grind or 3s grind and you're trying to be number 1, I mean, yeah, you need all 4 of these things to, like, succeed. But, like, you know what I mean? It's way easier to do that than to actually do that in esports, because that's, you're playing against a lot of guys. And that's kind of the same thing too. Like, again, you know, when you because, like, yeah, the ultimate goal is to form chemistry. That's why it's at the peak, it's at the top. You need these 3 things to work that out too. You need guys that are committed to the grind, you play well with, right? And then skill, if everybody's skilled on the line and everybody sees the game the same and you're on the same page in terms of the game plan, that's gonna raise the chemistry. Like, the chemistry is just gonna go up. So that's, like, again, ultimately, what are you trying to find? Guys that are dedicated and have a lot of chemistry with each other. You know, again, that also accomplished in all of these areas. Now, the issue that sometimes people run into is the conversation of ego. Because I think that also plays into an effect as well. Some guys, you know, let's say you have, like, guys that are not that skilled, and you know, you're grinding with them, you're trying to teach them a little bit, and they're getting better and better and better. Some guys, like, again, the expectation has to stay consistent. The goal has to stay consistent. If guys change the goal because they feel like we're ahead of the pack, or we're getting to that high level, like, you have to be honest with where you're at. Like, let's say you're here and everybody thinks that we're here. You may prematurely change the expectation before actually seeing results. Like, you don't want to make a change, like, mid-season or, like, prior to an event of what grind you're actually trying to go for. Some guys are like, well, hey, we want to get this done now. We want to win now. And you've spent the last 4 or 5 months trying to make a team. If that goal is not consistent and it changes, you're going to wind up messing with the foundation. So what winds up happening was, I'm building a team this way. That was how I set the lineup. Mainly looking at foundation, a little bit of skill into it. Now, there was only one team that actually made it out of this area, this stage, to where, hey, now we're actually getting into the skill and the game plan and the chemistry. Like, we're actually looking at the gameplay now. What wound up happening was, again, when you look at it from right to left, you have a chance of failing. There was an issue here with game plan that ultimately affected the way certain people looked at this individual, because they weren't on the same page with a certain game plan that ultimately made them look at their skill at a lower interval. They were, like, thinking they were down here, and then they wanted him out of the lineup, so that affected this. But you really can't do that, because, again, when you're trending this way, the moment you trend this way, you can no longer go back the other way. You just simply can't. When you do that, you turn a long-term grind into a short-term grind, and now you have a chance of it failing. And I tell you, I see it all the time with a lot of teams, and even my own. Right? When I look back at the team that was being created, we were trending in this way, and then eventually we looked and did a complete 180 when we got to here, because we wanted to establish somebody that was able and capable of doing a particular aspect of the game that individual did not have, and therefore that affected the individual skill of the way they looked at that. Again, it's all, like, perspective too, like how you set the bar. Like you have to be very critical with where you see the grade scale from the midpoint to the high to the low to the getting into each individual area, or like crossing the tier essentially. What is middle of the pack, what is not, you know, like what is all that, you know. So when you're going from left to right and you completely change, like if you have some guys that are on the mindset of going from left to right and all of a sudden other guys drift away from that path and they go this way, that's where problems occur, and that ultimately again affects the foundation. That we, you know, certain guys thought a certain individual was not capable of playing on the line, and therefore, hey, you know, it ultimately just created a lot of issues that way. So that's why it's so crucial. That's why it's so, yeah, it's so crucial to make sure that everybody's on the same page. Hey, if we're going to trend this way, we keep that same mentality. You have to. Because that will ultimately lead to a successful team, regardless of what happens in terms of the performance level. When you gauge what happens, even if you're way underperforming, like, you have to still keep that same mentality. And then you just have to tackle it like, hey, what is the issue? What are we not getting? And then you work that way. Because if you change, you go the other direction, that's where a lot of issues are going to wind up happening. And well, a lot of teams, man, I mean, that's kind of where it fails. Now, when you're like trying to figure out like, all right, we lost to this team, why? You start getting more so into this, the actual performance of the team, regardless of where the foundation is. I mean, honestly, the foundation is sort of there. But yeah, like, let's say, for example, you're a main division team and you're facing some of the best teams in the world, whatever. Let's say you have a green foundation. Everybody is highly skilled. You know, you kind of have the same like game plan, and you're executing it the same way the opposition is. But then you fail in the chemistry because you just didn't get enough reps. Like, then that's a chemistry issue. So like, when you look at really, really skilled teams like Entourage, Resilience, Underdogs, they have all four of this stuff in the high, like as high as you can go, because like they set the bar. Especially Entourage in previous years where they just were winning with their team, right? Everything is high. So you have to understand too, like, all right, if we're losing, where are we losing? So again, when you look at this, you have to really understand, where are the issues? Where is, all right, how strong is our foundation? How strong is our individual skill? How strong is our team play? How strong is our chemistry? If it's a chemistry issue, oh my gosh, you're fine. If it's only chemistry and everything here is fine, you are perfectly fine. Because then it's just a matter of continuously getting reps in. You're fine. But that would take a long time to get there anyway, first of all, to understand that. But if it's just a chemistry issue, you're perfectly fine. But I would say, 9 times out of 10, that's not the case. Because usually you got chemistry as a byproduct of all this stuff that's going wrong, technically too. But it all kind of meshes well with each other. But there is some teams, right, like, all right, they have a strong foundation, individual skills there, but you've got guys that don't understand the game of sixes, but they have really strong chem. So like, this is high, but then this is sort of mid or low, and you lose that way. Then it's because, all right, well, if we're not playing a trap well, we're not playing PK well, we're not playing power play. So that's kind of that. If your team's losing on penalties, individual skill. If you're getting beat around the bend as a defenseman, if you're losing the puck constantly as an offensive guy, then it's an individual skill. If it's, it's basically all that goes into just the individual skill. If you may have a solid game plan, that might be up. The chemistry may be like mid-tier, but then the individual skill, the performance level is kind of low. That's the reason you lost. So you have to know, like, all right, what goes into it, and exactly where did your team perform compared to the opposition in each of these categories. You know, so again, like foundation really doesn't go into that too much, because I would consider foundation everything that is non-gameplay related besides like the mindset of wins and losses. So like if you lose a game, how are you taking it? Do you just like crash out and just not like it at all? Like it, you know, like if that's the case, then you're not looking too good. Because obviously, you know, if you're just rage quitting and all that, like that's just the, you know, that goes into just a weak foundation player, regardless if they have really good talent. That's going to ultimately make the foundation go lower. But it's pretty much everything, you know, if you really go back into each individual thing, what are the highs and lows of it? The foundation, right? Again, mindset, availability, dedication. If you have all those three things, you're good. If you have a guy that, again, he's taking the loss, he's just rage quitting, he's very toxic in the party, he's not around, he could be the most skilled guy in the world, but if he's not around to play, that doesn't mean anything. And he may just be a fill-in guy, not really a guy that's dedicated to the grind. Like, he's not going to be a strong foundation player. So when you select your team, that's what goes into it. You got to understand that. And then again, individual skill, I was already talking about that. Everything individual related. Figuring out, you know, how to get better in terms of your own individual skill. Where are you lacking, right? You know, like for me, like offense is kind of not really my strong suit. Defense, you know, is more or less what I'm pretty solid in. But offense is not, you know, horrible. But this year I'm going to be working mainly on the offensive side of the game when it comes to defense or offense or whatever. So that's where I'm going to continuously get better in terms of that. And then limiting the, you know, somebody who isn't working on their game, is not playing, is not doing any of that, right? That's going to bring their skill down because they're just simply not getting the reps in, or they're not super critical of where they're failing. So understanding the highs and lows of that. And then the trap. If you don't know where you are in terms of the trap and gameplay related or like team play related, you know, you don't know where to be on the PK. You don't know where you should be offensively in terms of positioning, defensively as well. Where should you be playing? You're not like a winger that's going on the opposite side of the freaking, you know, zone to try to play defense, right? Like, you know, understanding how you can adjust your style in terms of the team play, and versus like, you know, not knowing where to go and all that kind of stuff. So that's where you break that kind of stuff down. And then chemistry related, this is just getting reps. If you get a lot of reps in with guys, you're just going to improve that. If you're not playing with them, I mean, chemistry really can't go lower. You know, like, I wouldn't really say, yeah, chemistry really doesn't go low. Like, you really can't, like, it's, you have a starting point of chemistry, but it's always going to go up. Like, I've got a buddy that's always played, or that, you know, didn't play much of NHL 24. He came back, and it was like we never left. You know what I mean? So, like, chemistry is always going to be built on, like, a certain starting point, and then it's just going to continuously go up. And then if you strengthen these things, that's going to build a strong foundation. And that's going to improve everybody's individual skill. You're going to get better reps. And then team play, you're going to work on that. So everything's just going to keep going up. And the whole point, obviously, is to build a long-term grind. But you have to be able to handle losses the correct way, I feel like. But I don't know. This is pretty much what I look at in terms of, like, a visual standpoint of building a team from the bottom up. Communication during the game is key. We were top 50 back in the day when we all played. We missed those days. Chemistry is key for me and trust. If I can't trust them out. Do you play Ultimate Team? I was planning on doing it soon, but I don't even know if I want to based on the feedback of other people. When are you playing Ultimate 25 again? I don't know. I think the next time I go live, but I'm not entirely sure. Composure back in the day was the best team I have played against. I struggle with tie-ups as a winger. Just finished 4th in the Sharks event I played for Legends Never Die. We didn't have the chemistry like resilience. Yeah, I was actually watching that a little bit too. Wait, what do you think the minimum stick checking needed this year for competitive stick checking. I mean, that's kind of up to you, honestly, depending on what trait you're using. Like if you're using stick 'em up or not. But I would say if you have gold stick 'em up, probably low 80s, mid 80s or so, I guess. I don't know, probably like an average around 80 to 85. Just, you know, that's where I've been. Yeah, I was watching like Legends Never Die versus Resilience. I think, yeah, like those teams were good, but like when you change personnel, that ultimately just affects chemistry. So when you have like esports, high level esports teams, and they make a switch, like how Dumoulin went from underdogs to Resilience, right? But he's also kind of playing with the same guys like that he's been playing with before. He had like 2 other guys that were from Entourage. So, like, still, like, let's say you make a change, you're a high level player and you made the cut for a high level esports team, and then you move to another team, you don't necessarily have the chemistry. You know, I don't really see that team winning. It's usually like those teams that have been good have pretty much have established this stuff. When you make a change, that's going to affect the chemistry, right? So when you lose, like when I would look at that, I wouldn't necessarily say Legends Never Die is a team that has, you know, didn't play these areas well enough. I would say that they just had a lower chemistry level because they just didn't have as many reps in as other guys that have been playing the game for so long. That's why, again, having a sustainable team that sticks with the roster, I think, is key. Even if you may not be on the high end of talent level. If your individual talent level is like somewhere in the middle here, like that's fine as long as you stick with that. And if your foundation winds up being high, like you want to stick with that. Like that's just the byproduct of a sustainable long-term team. And that's kind of like, you know, again, like to play, you know, main division esports, I would say you need to have high levels of all this stuff. But the foundation has to be the first thing that's high. Otherwise, the rest of the stuff is going to wind up hitting a certain level. And if the production level, if the end result is not satisfying to that line, they'll just move the line. Because in reality, they believe this stuff was actually the problem. And in reality, it was actually the foundation that wasn't just solid enough yet. Like, they had a good line, but they just decided not to play because they didn't like what was happening here. You know, with the gameplay. You know, I don't know. I don't really like that too much because, again, I would feel like for me, if you have good, strong foundation qualities to a team, you should be allowed to be on that team, regardless of where everything else is at. That's kind of why I looked at certain guys like, you know, hey, let's, you know, they may not have been on the high end of talent level, but they were still good enough for the team because they were willing to grind to eventually get there. And that's why, again, it's a long-term grind. It's not a short-term grind. If you're going to play esports, you got to have a long-term grind sort of in mind, I would say. If you don't, you're going to wind up having a lot of trades, a lot of guys change, right? And you may never get there because you're not sticking it with a certain team. You're not sticking it with a certain roster, like a certain player. Like, that's why you gotta, I don't know. Like, when I'm looking at the way my team, or the team that I was on that performed in the when I played in the Sharks event, we play in the main division. I like the guys. They were, I mean, you know, they were pretty decent with the talent level, I would say. I think honestly we failed in the game plan because I just don't think when you look at like trap or breakouts or offensive zone play, defensive zone play, I think we were struggling there, and then we definitely struggled in the chemistry because we just did not play that much. And ultimately that's a reflection of the foundation because we did not have a sort of grind that was optimal enough to actually compete in the main division. I mean, it was my first event. Like, again, if the expectation was to just, you know, be competitive as we can, not really care too much about the end result, then you can understand, like, all right, well, we didn't make playoffs. Something would have to change to be able to compete, right? Because if you're going to run it back, something has to change. Something has to spark something to show some kind of improvement. And ultimately, I don't think, I mean, if there isn't any change, that's only going to bring this down further because you're not working on these other things. And nothing's changing, so nothing's going to actually improve, and the same outcome is going to happen. But if you go in with the mindset of, all right, we're just going to play, regardless of what happens, we'll make adjustments as we go, then the foundation kind of stays the same or could get better. Because you're not affecting this. Again, when this is affected by performance, you're most likely going to probably fail. If it's affected by performance in a good way, though, that's going to bring everything up because the process is going to change and you're going to continuously get better. Like, again, everything kind of works as one. I feel like I'm kind of looping with what I'm saying now. But I'm just trying to tackle it from all angles pretty much. But again, like for me, if I was going to build a team from the bottom up, foundation is always key. And then you kind of work on these other things. You know, for me, it'd be like, all right, let's go into the first event, not care really about too much about performance. And then kind of work from there. If everybody's in agreement with that, then you can sort of raise the stakes in the second event, third event, fourth event, fifth event. Like, you want to have a game plan for what it's going to take to actually get to the top. If you do not have that and you're just kind of running it, which is like, all right, let's just go out there and play, you're going to wind up turning into a very short-term grind very quick because you're not really looking for the future. You're looking at the right now. And if the right now is not good, then, oh, we're going to move on. That's kind of a problem. Every single team I look at failed here because they didn't have a nice, solid process that was in agreement with everybody, or something changed outside of the game, or maybe perhaps within the game. And that affected the foundation in a negative way, and then that's when everything kind of split. Like, when I look at NSO 22, that was the first time I played sixes. Again, this is like, this whole thing kind of came from the experience level of NSO 22 to 24. Or I guess to now, I guess, because it's NSO 25 now. But, like, we had a team, we were just trying to play, get good. Our expectation was, I mean, actually, we didn't really have one. We were kind of all inexperienced to sixes. We were all just kind of learning on the fly. I think I was doing breakdowns in 22. Like, it wasn't that great, but still, like, I was still trying to, improve, right? The reason the 22 grind failed, like, we hit club finals. I think we, like, finished 11th or something, which was actually, like, way above expectation of what we were actually assuming. We went on, like, a 16-game win streak in club finals. That was back when they didn't have the rounds, right? Where it was just you play the most amount of games and then you get put on a ranking of the top 10 grind or whatever. Like, if you were in a top 10, your like team name was shown in the freaking loading screen of the next game. So for us, we were 11th. We almost hit top 10, which would have been really good for us. But like, that was the first time we were like, we were in it. We had a good, I would say we had a pretty solid foundation because we had a lot of guys playing. I would say our foundation was somewhere like here when we were playing, because we were like really grinding. We were just like super hype with it. Good comms, right? Everything was kind of trending up. And then what happened was people started to play the game less. They didn't have a consistent schedule moving forward. And again, availability was shot. So that brought the foundation down. That brought everything else down. We got a bunch of guys that filled in, but they weren't really solid. Like, we were kind of just getting guys in wherever. And we kind of constantly had to keep changing positions. And therefore, ultimately, that affected the foundation even worse. People were less inclined to play because they were less motivated. And therefore, the 22 grind kind of came to an end that way. And we tried to spark it back up at 23. But again, dedication, availability, that was kind of the issue there with Hack Pack Brotherhood at that time, right? That was on 23. Then we had another team. It's called like Fast and Furious. I'll never. This team was like they had absolutely no knowledge, almost no knowledge of how to play proper sixes. And the reason they had almost no knowledge is because they, in their mind, they thought 5v5 was more competitive than 6v6. Meaning, they would they thought that AI tendies, the teams that had AI tendies, were better than teams with tendies, with human tendies. I don't know what the hell they were thinking. When I look at that, that's probably the worst team out of all the teams that I've been a part of. And they were like really, they were a 2s and 3s team that wanted to come together. It was like 2 separate teams that wanted to come together to form a 6s grind. Yeah, we're gonna go and join these events and you know, and win, take it to the top. It's like, but then they thought that being top dog in the leaderboard was a sign that they were a good team, which is like beyond freaking mind-boggling, because it was just pathetic. Eventually that team folded like easily, like it's just because they just never wanted to play with a human tendency. So I just like, yeah, I'm just gonna move on here. This is like really pathetic. And then there was we tried to run it with another team. Kind of had the same guy, like a couple guys. And then again, that was a foundation error because we had a grind at the end of 23, heading into NHL 24. And what wound up happening was there was issues with loading in the World of Chell. So if anybody had like the issue where they couldn't load in the World of Chell because of their internet provider, like it was the guys with like AT&T or something on PlayStation couldn't load into, like they could play HUT, but they couldn't load into World of Chell. So like we had to pause that grind for a little while because we didn't have the certain personnel. But ultimately it was literally because of one person. I mean, because we didn't have anybody that would, you know, that we wanted to get in terms of like fill-ins, just so that we could get reps in. It's just, it was an issue with the foundation again. Bang bang. And then they kind of stepped away from the game for a little while, so that's when I formed Hackpack. And again, when you have a year and a half of failed teams, you kind of, you know, I would say learn from that. So my focus was, instead of trying to find guys that were good here, my focus was, let's build from the bottom up in terms of foundation with a little bit of skill, and then go from there. And then you work into each individual thing, you know, each individual element or pillar or whatever. So you get guys committed to the grind. Then you start working on skill because you're playing with them. You're coaching them up. Hey, I think you need to play back here. You need to do this. All the while, you're also then analyzing the game plan. Hey, I think we need to trap here. In this situation, we need to rotate it full reset it back. You know, work on call outs, work on power play, PK. You start doing that. And then you work on the chemistry once, you know, it's not like you work on one and then move to the next. It's, you're working on all of it. But again, like, you got to be super critical with each area. So like I was telling people how to get better in terms of, you know, playing defense or offense or whatever, how we can all work together as one in terms of, you know, trapping or forechecking or whatever it is, right? You work on those things, and then while we're playing, we're also getting better with our chemistry, so everything is working up. Everything trending upward. You want the end result is every single aspect trending upward. There was no, for me, there wasn't an expectation to win. You take the wins, you take the losses, you have the same mindset with both. You don't feel good because you win. You also have to understand, hey, our skill level is here, but we faced a team here and we kicked their ass. That doesn't mean we're good. Some guys are like, hey man, we're actually up here because we just won. We just beat this team 8-1. That was my kind of issue. Some guys were like, they were working from right to left. They thought a certain individual was skilled because of how we were performing. Because we kicked the crap out of like these 3-4 teams in a row. But to me, it's like, bro, performance, that doesn't matter, because in my mind, these guys were like here at best and we're like here, so we're gonna win. you know, like, against any of these teams. But then at the very moment we get to here, now all of a sudden, like with the talent level, and we're still here, we believe that, oh, we had a weak point in one of the individual skill, right? And that brought us down, you know, here for that game or so. So you know, and then we, you know, that's where people had an issue with that. So you have to, again, you have to be very clear with what you're doing. If you're going to build a team from the bottom up, in my opinion, performance, at least in the beginning, should not matter. It really should not. It should be, all right, we won, but there's still a lot to learn. We lost, there's definitely stuff to learn. And then you just kind of gauge, all right, this team is doing this well, this team's doing this well, and then you kind of go through, hey, you know, they're trapping, they're breaking out the puck very well, and we're here with that. Like when it comes to trapping against their break-in or breaking in against their trap, and it's kind of like, all right, this is the reason why they kicked their the crap out of us, because they are in the high with these certain individual aspects of the game, and we're in the yellow, or we're in potentially the red. Who knows, right? Like if you lose like 10-1 or something in a game, you know, what they were doing has to be at least a tier higher than you, or more, right? Like they could be two tiers. Like you could be doing something that game that was in the low, and they were like in the high. They were just completely wrecking you. So if you're very analytical with that kind of stuff, which for me, like when I was breaking down film, that was like the majority of the thoughts that I was having. Like, all right, this team's doing this well, this team's doing this well, we need to work on this when I'm looking at it. And that's, you know, again, not looking at it in terms of like, all right, the performance level is not where it needs to be, obviously, right? But it's, we're going to continue to get better and not worry about the end result of a game. It's take the wins and losses in stride. That's going to build this up. Keep working on the skill. You keep working on the game plan. You keep working on the chem. Ultimately, you're going to go from here to here to here to here. You know, if you're just going to keep moving up. Once you get away from that, then things start going down because you want something to be better than it is. So then you go from here to then going this direction, and now you're at the risk of it failing because of a short-term grind. I think that's a better way of me of actually explaining it. So ultimately, long-term grind, build the foundation, work on these other aspects as you go. You set an expectation. Regardless if that expectation did not work, then you adjust, right? You look at each game very critically, and then you make the corrections, and you do all the stuff that you need to do, right? And then you set an expectation that's realistic to where you're currently at, because then you should know, right? If you play an event and the guy and the teams that you were facing were like at least here or above, or at least the teams that beat you, and you know, like you're here, you know, obviously there's a gap here. You know, ideally when you're playing esports, I would say you want to be as close to the high or above that as you can, which means you need to understand what it takes to actually be esports ready. If it's Contenders Cup or high, which is different, or Contenders Cup or main division, which is two different levels, I would say. But I would say overall, in the level of esports, to win in Contenders, you got to be at least crossing the threshold to the high. So what does that even mean, right? Like you got to be able to understand where that is, which means you should be able to have an idea of that. If you don't, well, then you just play and figure it out. That's just how it is. I can't explain it, right? It's a matter of how well is each of these areas that you're playing, and it's like the average. If the foundation is, if the foundation is somewhere here, chemistry level is here, individual skill is maybe here, and game plan is here. Well, now you know you're averaging here, you know, like you're averaging somewhere here, and now you still have a lot to do. Like you still have a lot to work on. And then next event goes, and now you're somewhere, you know, you're in the green because you actually added a few more assets. You have the utility guys there. Everybody's dedicated. Everybody's learning, being coached. So the foundation's there. Game plan goes into the high. Skill level maybe goes here. And chemistry is also here. Now you're averaging. Hey, guess what? You're crossing the threshold. You're actually starting to get better, right? Like you're actually more esports ready to take on the competition you're facing. And then you do it again, you do it again, you do it again, right? So then, hey, foundation's high again, chemistry's high, skill is high, and game plan is high. Hey, guess what? You just won the contenders. Like, you see what I'm saying? Like, by the third event or so, if that's your expectation based on where you currently sit your first in terms of your baseline, right? You keep on improving. And that's the idea of a long-term grind. It's not a matter of where you're at in your first. That's just a baseline. We don't care about that. We continue to move up and get better. You keep adding the assets that's needed. You keep adding, you keep working on the skill, the game plan, the chemistry, and you just keep trending upward. The more you do that, the better chances you are of winning long-term. Instead of, hey, I want to work from the right to left, so I want to get somebody I mesh well with that sees the game the way I do. That determines that, hey, this guy's good, and now he's an eligible candidate for the foundation. But that doesn't necessarily mean, right, that they're going to join your team too, right? They could have all these aspects, but they're like, oh yeah, I'm already a part of another team, so see ya. So that means it just means nothing. So that's kind of what I mean. Working from right to left is a dangerous game. It doesn't mean it's not going to work. It just isn't most likely going to be sustainable until you get to this in an upward direction. Then you start turning it into a more sustainable long-term grind that wins. All right. That's kind of where I'm at in terms of everything that goes into it. I think in the beginning I was kind of like not quite sure where I was going, but I think the more I talked about it, the more rational it started to appear. What's up, Chris? Chad, I just want to know how I can make my deep man when he skates with the puck, how I can have his stick way out like other forwards. That all goes with skating style. Can't figure out the right skating styles. Well, there's, I don't know. I think most of the guys have like 99 for a lot of categories, and there's like certain other categories. I could always show it the next time I'm live. Honestly, I'm probably not going to play any games. But, what's up, Chris? Missed the first hour. I have to go back and watch it later. Yeah, it's kind of just everything that goes into like what makes a, you know, competitive long-term grind. I think kind of in the like beginning, I was kind of getting all over the place with some things, but the more I talked, I feel like the more I was able to explain it in a better way, at least for me. But that's kind of what I'm looking for. You know, when you have like-minded guys that are dedicated to the grind, like that's a recipe for success. You know, you're going to get to that point where you're going to be trending upward, you know? So making sure that the foundation is the good starting point, that's always what I look at first. I don't really concern too much with these three other aspects. Individual skill, yeah, maybe a little bit. But again, like, you have to look at it from that angle, where it's like, all right, you kind of touch a little bit into skill. Because you don't want somebody, like, let's say you're... If I was to rate myself, let's say I'm, you know, I'm like really high with my ego. I'm going to think I'm here. And then somebody else is like barely crossing the low to middle threshold. I mean, that's going to take a long time, right? There's a big time gap that they'd have to fill before they can even get close to your skill level so that you can actually continue to get better. Because they're going to have to double their efforts to get better while you try to inch your way a little bit higher, which is kind of tough. So skill is important. You don't want guys that are 2 tiers behind you, but you want guys that are like, if you're going to think that you're crossing the threshold into the high, you want guys that are like at least slightly above the midpoint. If you're going to have an expectation of, all right, in a couple months, we're going to play and see how it goes, and then continue to make... I mean, you could have guys that are low if you're fine with that. It's kind of just up to you. But again, like, the higher you go, the more filters you add to certain things, the lower the player pool of guys that you can actually have on your team kind of become, if that makes sense. So if you're only looking for specific talent, if you're going to only look for guys that are around your skill level, then that player pool, that filter, it's kind of tough because you have to have all 4 of these things in check in order for that to even be, for them to even be a candidate to play on your team. And that could be a long-term search. So that could still end up being a long-term grind to find that. It's not like you're just going to find it and there it is. You got to have guys that are willing to grind with you, regardless of where their talent level is. If you have that mindset of, all right, we're just going to keep getting better, that performance doesn't matter. It doesn't matter how good they are. It doesn't matter what they lack, because you can teach that. If they have a good mindset and they're coachable, you could nurture that talent. That's what I believe. You could turn a 3s player into a 6s player. It may take a long time, but hey, if you're down for that grind and they're committed and they're playing, they're constantly getting better, and they're listening to what you're saying, they're gonna, I mean, depending on how quickly they grasp it, I mean, it wouldn't take them that long to actually get to around your own skill level, because you're constantly on them. And if they're at least receiving the feedback in a positive way, that's gonna just make them better and better. And that's what I was seeing with some people. Like, you know, some guys were constantly hitting me up trying to play and all that kind of stuff. I was like, all right, well, you guys are committed to the grind. Let's get you in. And even if skill was, you know, mid-tier or game plan, they weren't understanding some things, and the chemistry obviously, you know, maybe wasn't quite there yet, it still doesn't matter. Even if they're middle of the pack or even lower, eventually, hey, you would want them, if they're going to start here, by the end of the first event there, by the end of the second event there, by the end of the hey, there you go. You know, like, as long as they're continuously moving up. So that's the key factor, is long-term grind, continue to move up. And obviously it's not going to be that easy, and it's not going to be that simple. But again, if you have the right mindset and everybody understands that, it has a very minimal chance of it failing. But that's the kind of team that I'm kind of looking at. Again, there was a lot to learn from the event and the previous years of playing. You know, that I think that's just what, like, to me, this is what I learned, is everything here. And it most likely isn't perfect. Like, you could probably switch some of the stuff around. Like, I just think, like, from the way I was looking at it, I think it makes sense based on whichever way you go. It's going to follow these kind of pillars. Like, it's going to follow this step upward. And if you look at it from the opposite way, you're going to find guys that you mesh well with, that see the game like you, and that in your mind is going to determine what you think of their actual overall skill. And then that's going to determine whether you actually want them on your team or not. So that's why I kind of aligned it this way. And I think it's a good representation of it. It may not be perfect, but I think, I honestly believe in my head, like, that's kind of what I'm looking at. But that's the thing. If I was to do it again, I think in my mind, the reason the last team that I ran, I think the reason it failed is because I didn't make the expectation clear enough. Even if they understood it, they didn't understand it to the degree that I was looking at. Because I think they wanted to do well in the first event, which I cannot completely understand that. But again, if you make a change for the sake of making a change, which happened twice, right? I was looking at it like this. If you make a change for the sake of making a change, and this gets affected, if the foundation gets affected by the changes you're making, it's the wrong move. It's too early. Or it shouldn't happen. Like, if you're making a change based on this, if you're making a change based on this, which was the two problems we had, that made it changed this, it made the foundation worse, it's the wrong move. But because of complications, we had to make that move, and we went from what was possibly on the brink of having a high foundation to trending downward, and we couldn't fill that void. We just couldn't fill it. We couldn't bring it back up because we couldn't come to a consensus on who we wanted, because we wanted these other areas to be at a certain baseline that wasn't set. For me, the baseline was, there wasn't a baseline. But for the others, I think they wanted a specific baseline that was maybe around here or higher. And anybody that was lower, they didn't want to be on the team. But you play a dangerous game, like I say, because now if it affects the foundation, you start to twist it back the other way, where now you need these things to even affect the foundation. And it didn't pan out the way that we wanted it to. And then people started to, you know, it kind of pulled on the chains of trust in the process that I had, which does go, the process does go into you know, the foundation. They wanted it to be done differently. They wanted other guys to be in. They wanted, you know, just a different process in general. And then the feedback wasn't being trusted. And then, you know, the dedication to the specific process or grind was not met. Therefore, it eventually continued to go down, down, down. And in my mind, it technically was already here well before it happened, or well before I even thought it was. But as soon as I saw it cross from the mid-tier to low, as soon as it did that, the team had no chance of revival. And once you get to red foundation, it's already failed. It's already failed. Like, you could build a team and that's trending upward, right? You're gonna start, the starting point's gonna be like right here, right? Because you're gonna try to find the personnel person, you know, you're gonna keep trying to go upward. You establish 6 guys, you keep working, you find other guys that can fill in. And then if guys drop out, and the other guys are not filling in and stuff like that, now you start going the other direction. Boom, boom, boom. And then once it crosses the starting point that you had, I mean, it has absolutely no chance. Because that's actually worse. What winds up happening is you have a process that's being trusted. Once that process is also lost, that trust is lost, there's absolutely zero chance of getting it back. Almost zero chance. At least for that specific grind. And that's kind of what I was saying. Again, there's no like specific details on certain, you know, nobody really knows what happened before, but that's what, in my mind, when it came down to losing it, it was because of that. The foundation just went down. In my mind, it didn't matter what happened here. It was everything that had to do with that. And that's when that is lost, everything else is kind of just, whatever. Game over. So then I try to quickly find, and that's actually why I think, like, you know, when I joined the team I joined for the Sharks event, I was kind of like last second. Plus, for me, like, where I think the reason we didn't make playoffs, let's say the expectation for the Sharks event for the team that I was on was to make playoffs, which I think it was. I think it was just, hey, let's try to be competitive and make playoffs. For me, it was, I think I was underperforming in the skill. And we didn't get a lot of reps in, which ultimately affected the chemistry. And that affected how we played. It was 4 times the negative that you could possibly have for a team. And if I'm being brutally honest, that's really what it came down to. I was underperforming, and that also affects other people too. We weren't getting games in that much. Guys weren't around or whatever. We just didn't have the competitive, or I mean, we had the competitive mindset to play, but it's like we just didn't have the mentality of grinding after or outside of game days. It's kind of like an LG grind almost, you know, where you just only play on game day. That affected the chemistry, which affected how we, you know, try to play the game. Because I think there's a lot of things that we weren't really tweaking properly, I feel like. But, you know, again, like, I'm not gonna say one thing was over the next. I just think, like, it's a chain reaction. When you start to see something and a certain aspect go downward, it affects everything else. So, like, chemistry in and of itself is affected by all these other things, right? Like, it doesn't mean that, oh, we lost because of a lack of chem. No, we lost because of everything else. But chemistry was also a part of it because everything else was not there. So it's kind of tough to really, like, if you're only through the mindset of, oh, we just need to keep playing, you know, that's gonna build chemistry. But it's like, if you're not actually attacking the individual areas outside of chemistry's not really going up then. It's kind of like a byproduct of everything else succeeding. So that's kind of, I don't know, that's kind of where I'm at. For me, heading into 25, you know, I'm going to be looking for these 4 specific things, but mainly from a foundation standpoint. If the foundation is stronger than any other team that I'm trying to look at, that's, you know, the strongest foundation is what I'm going to wind up committing to. You know, anybody could have a plan to have a nice, successful team, but you got to have a strong foundation for it to actually pan out. And if we're going to learn from anything that happened before, at least for me, I mean, ultimately, the reason the team that I had before, it was really because of me. I just didn't make the, I didn't make the parameters, you know, specific enough for the guys to be on board with it. I think I gave a general sort of, this is what I'm generally looking at. I just didn't really go into detail in terms of that. I think once it started to trend downward, I didn't do enough to raise it back up quick enough before the foundation hit red. Once it did that, it had no chance. But it should have and could have been saved a lot sooner than that. But that's, you know, what I'm going to be looking for. Foundation first, then everything else. As long as this is trending upward, that's the team I'm going to be committing to. So we'll see what happens. I don't know. But that's the plan for 25 or 2025. I think 2025 is going to be a big year. When I just think about it from an everything standpoint, I feel like there's not really, as, you know, even just outside the game in general, there's a lot that's going to happen. So it's going to be a big year from start to finish. But yeah, I don't know if you guys have any concerns, if you're rewatching this back on YouTube or anything like that, and you decided to stick with me for an hour and 17 minutes, 18 minutes, highly appreciate it. It's not really a topic that, like, super entertaining unless you're super engaged in the subject. So I am going to get into more gameplay in the following streams, but this is just something I wanted to kind of get off my chest because it's been in my thought, in my mind for quite some time. I want to get sort of in a, you know, presentation format, I guess. But yeah, let me know what you guys think, either in the comments or just whatever, you know. But yeah, I mean, again, it's gonna be a big year, I feel like. I definitely want to get into more gameplay, possibly HUT. I'm not entirely sure. If you guys want to see like a Be Pro series, you kind of, you know, I guess you guys can let me know too, but I feel like I want to wait on that. But since the internet, I did a test last night on the internet to see how my stream was holding up and also my connection in game, and that's actually good now, so I can definitely start to stream some of these events moving forward. I just wasn't doing it because I was lagging out like crazy. Like, if you guys seen like a couple weeks ago, it was actually my Ethernet cable, or yeah, I think I had like a couple cables. It was like I had the Rocky Mountains of ping is really what it was. And if you're going to try to play like a competitive league with Rocky Mountain ping, I think you're just setting yourself up for failure. So I was able to switch that out, get a better, more stable cord, and now it's actually good again. So we definitely get more gameplay out there and more live streams if you guys definitely want to see that. So I think we got LG. We got the next 2 weeks off because of the holidays. So if I'm not live tomorrow, hope you guys have a good Christmas, and we'll look at you know, some streams or videos probably next weekend sometime. If I'm not live tomorrow, I'm not sure if I'm going to go live tomorrow or not, but we'll see what happens. So I appreciate you guys watching. Hope you have a good rest of your night, and I'll catch you guys next time.